Okay. Hello. So, as is my custom, I'm all over the place with the stuff I'm looking into and the stuff I'd like to talk about. And as usual, I've got about 20 topics, about 80% ready for prime time. So, I thought I would just pick one of them that has been at the forefront of my mind the last couple weeks and just riff on it for a little while. I don't really have notes. I'm just going to go for it and just give you some of my thoughts. And the topic on today is going to be freedom. We've talked about freedom before in a couple other videos, just mentioned it in passing. I want to dig a little deeper and fold in some of the research and other things that I've been doing in other areas, other related topics, and just lay this idea out there since it's a big one. Big meaning in today's, what do you want to call it, church environment, church culture? The concept of freedom is one of the huge, it's getting up there with the concept of grace. And I think both of them are misunderstood. When I say that, let me say, as with language, a lot of people bring different types of definitions to different words. So when I say it's misunderstood, what I guess I should say is there's a lot of different definitions and ideas of what freedom means in the context of our day-to-day life and also in the context of the gospel and what the point is. When I look at the lyrics for Christian songs nowadays, that's one that keeps becoming more and more popular, this idea that Jesus comes to set us free. And then people rejoice, and one of the songs says, I dance in your freedom, awake and alive, as though, and freedom from the grave is often associated with it. This concept of being free. The Bible has interesting things to say about freedom. It's almost always within the context of being compared to the idea of slavery, which is another topic in and of itself. But I want to touch on it really quick here because it gives us the context of what freedom means. Slavery, you're obliged to do what someone else wants you to do at any given time, or you're obliged to a commitment of some kind. A law can dictate to you what you can and can't do. You're committed to something. You have a master who will tell you what to do. And the opposite of that is freedom, where you don't have an obligation or you don't have a master or someone telling you what to do. You're free to do your own thing. The word freedom is only in the Old Testament once, and it's only in the New Testament once, oddly enough. The word free is in there quite a bit, but like I said, it's usually in the context of a slave. It's talking about slavery and being set free from your slavery to someone who is dictating to you what you can and can't do. The law does that. But the free is also talked about in the New Testament. Paul talks about it a lot within the context of the free gift. The free gift from God, which is kind of redundant. It's a gift given without reference to anything that you did to deserve it. It's just an act of generosity. The concept actually is in the Old Testament as well, the free will offering. In several places it talks about that. If someone in a spontaneous gesture in the moment decides to generously give something to somebody or to donate it to the tabernacle or to someone who was in need, it's not a pre-planned thing. So it's of your own free will. You decide to, in addition to your normal obligations, also include something else above and beyond. So those are the concepts that the Bible talks about. But I think in freedom, the way we talk about it, and by we, I mean the church, and I'm careful to say that because I want, as we talk about subjects like this, not to give you the impression that I'm distancing myself from Christians and Christianity as though I'm withdrawing. I still include we, as in we, even though that's kind of silly to do because the scope of Christianity is staggering. It's overwhelming. It's like 2.5 billion people that call themselves Christians in the world. I think 1.4 billion of them are categorize themselves as Catholic, and then I think the Eastern Orthodox has the next biggest group of people, and then Protestants of various flavors, all over the map. You get any 10 Christians in the room and they'll have 10 opinions on 10 differing opinions, and they all call themselves Christians. There's some strange dynamics that go on when it comes to people. I'm going to branch off a little bit and then tie it back into the concept of freedom, because this has directly involves what I want to say about freedom. And I want to lay a little groundwork over here first. And that has to do with the concept of religions in general and philosophy in general. And I've been looking into the basic tenets and questions and understandings of other religions, when they started and how and what they were rebelling against, because it seems like every religious movement that starts from Hinduism on forward is in response to what went before, and it's in an effort to break apart the religion or religious structure of something that went before and introduce something new that seems to always bridge the gap between the regular everyday person and God. It's a strange pattern. I've been noticing patterns all over the place. And I'm going to talk about religion first, but the same patterns apply in the area of philosophy and the different lines of thought. There's a pattern here. Something is established, and usually it has the equivalent of a priesthood that has solidified and formed a barrier between normal people, if you will, and God. It's like an intermediary. They first start off as something that's positive, but eventually that priesthood solidifies into a barrier, an obstacle that ultimately prevents normal people from accessing God. They become very self-important and become such an integral part of the system, and then they learn how to work it and take advantage of it, and pretty soon you get indulgences and other things. Or in the Hindus with the Brahmin priests, that if you were rich enough to afford the Brahmin priests to perform rituals for you, then you could earn karma so that your next life would be better than this life. But if you were poor, you couldn't afford the Brahmins, so you couldn't accrue any of this spiritual currency and buy yourself a better life in the next one. I know obviously Christians don't believe in reincarnation, but we do believe in death and resurrection and an afterlife, so you could look at it that way, because the same dynamic happened with the Catholic Church and it prompted the Protestant Reformation, and the same thing happened when Jesus came. Confucianism started the same way, rebelling against what was there and trying to bring it back to the regular people. And then so a person will come and lead a movement that destroys or tries to destroy what went before and establish something new, and then get adherents to start following the person's new teachings. Those become the rules and their scriptures. Then there are people who have to go to special lengths to study them and become the priests, if you will, of this new movement, which then solidifies and becomes the very thing that they set out to destroy to begin with. There's always this barrier that goes between God or gods, depending on the religion, and just the regular rank and file person. It's a very strange dynamic, and I think it has to do with human nature. But again, the same thing applies to all the realms of philosophy. You rebel against someone comes along with some new thoughts and some new things, a new way to look at life with part of its purpose to destroy the what went before and to show that it's inferior, and you've got a new way. Then you get new followers and new disciples who then become the new version, and it re-solidifies like volcanoes that constantly erupt and then solidify and become the next layer that needs to be broken through and new. It's just this endless cycle of people. And I noticed one of the things as I was studying all the different religions, I wanted to find out what questions were they asking. Before I move on to that, Jesus did the same thing with the Pharisees and Judaism and the way it had hardened and became a barrier to the people. John the Baptist came, laid the groundwork for Jesus to come and explode that thing, gathered lots of disciples, many of whom left. His sayings became writings, and then the disciples expanded into the church, and then the church solidified into what has become. I've been studying also the early church, the first 400 years between the time of Paul and the time of Augustine, which is also fascinating. What does this have to do with freedom? I'm getting there. These religions and philosophies and social things like socialism, they're kind of economic, psychology, Freud and Nietzsche and others, they all seem to be asking the same basic questions. I was surprised by that. No matter how far you go back, no matter what part of the world, no matter which religion you look into, they're all asking the same basic questions, and they're all coming at them, answering them from a different perspective. Lots of different answers to the same basic questions, and the same basic questions have to do with God. Is there a God or gods, or is there not? What do we do with suffering? Suffering in our own life and suffering in those that we see around us. And what are we supposed to do? Why are we here, and how are we supposed to live? These seems to be the questions, but that one about suffering is huge, because every religion I'm looking into has a different way to approach the idea of suffering. The unpleasantness that you have to endure. The Hebrew word for suffering has to do with that word that we use for forgive, which means to lift up. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I think it's nasa, but it might be something else. But it has to do with carrying weight. Lifting something up and putting it on your shoulders and carrying it. Suffering is a weight that we have to carry. Each of us do. Sometimes it's weight we put on ourselves. Sometimes it's weight that other people put on us. That's injustice. We didn't deserve it. Someone picked up that weight and put it on us. And then sometimes God puts weight on us as well. And so sometimes there are weights that we want to carry. Those are blessings. Those are the good things. The life of ease and prosperity and everything is great and all our families around us. It's like we want to carry those weights. It's like human being is designed to carry weight. It's like we're a vessel or something, a beast of burden. We're designed in order to carry weight. And what determines the difference between suffering and blessing is whether that weight is something that we want to carry or not. Whether it's painful. Whether, all things considered, I wish I could put down this weight. Have you suffered an injustice? That galls you, right? And it's this thing you have to suffer through and you have to endure. It's a weight that you're being made to carry, that someone else treated you poorly and loaded you with something that you have to carry. So getting out from under those bad burdens, the evil ones, if you will, that's suffering. What to do with others who you see are carrying weights. Can you relieve them of that and carry it for them? That's forgiveness. Can you forgive someone of the weight that they're carrying? Someone does something to harm you, that's a weight that they need to carry. They sowed that. You're carrying weight, they're carrying weight. So can you take that off of them or not and carry it yourself? What do you do with that weight that you're carrying? What do you do with suffering? The Buddhists have an interesting way of looking at it. They say that the way to deal with your own personal suffering is to lose your idea of you as an individual. If you have no identity, if you're just one small part of something that's much grander and all of us are part of something much bigger than us, then what is there to suffer? There's no me who's suffering if there's no me. That's the way they try to find it. You achieve this state called nirvana, and by doing that, you don't have to worry about suffering for yourself, which is interesting. The Confucianism, they attack suffering with the concept of family. They redefined the word, what family stood for, and the help that you get and your position in the family. They find comfort in that. So family, those that are around you will help you bear the weights that you have to bear, and also rituals. So if you perform rituals, it reminds you that you're a part of something bigger, that there's something grander than you and your own suffering to take your eyes off of it. So you perform the rituals with the things that you burn and the things that you do and the things that you chant, and you make sure your heart is in it and your attitude is correct, and that will help to dispel the weight that you carry. Christianity has become a way, and this is where I'm tying it back into the concept of freedom, because I think what people say when they sing about freedom and the freedom that Christ gives us is they're talking about that suffering that we all have to deal with. But here's what's interesting. The way Christianity has evolved and become commonplace, you'll hear it in every sermon, you'll hear it in every song, is this idea that Jesus paid the price for our sins. So we did something, we sowed something that produced weight that we have to carry. That's the concept of sowing and reaping. When you do something that generates weight that you have to endure, and all things considered, you wish you could put it down, but you can't because you sowed it, you reap it. That's a law of the kingdom. You can't bypass it. So what Christianity has become was that Jesus came to die for us, to carry that weight for us, so that we don't have to carry it anymore. Now that sounds right, but it's only partially right, and it is warped, because what he did not do was come to carry every weight that we will ever sow in the future. That's what it's become. It's become a way for us to sow something that will produce weight that he will carry for us. So we are free. We're free from sin, they say, but what they mean is we're free from the repercussions of sin. We're free from the ramifications of our behavior. We are free to live however we want, and someone else will pick up the tab for it. We are free to commit the crime, and someone else will serve the time. Jesus has become our Savior, meaning he has become the person who comes to carry the weight for us so that we can live however we want. We are free to live however we want, and someone else will pay the tab. That someone else with a capital S is Jesus. That's what the gospel has become, and it makes me wonder if there really are any Christians anymore. You look at all of the denominations, and they all have variations on the theme, but what I'm learning is that there's really only two differences between theology and philosophy. If you create this spectrum, a long line, and it's got the extremes on both ends, and half of it is philosophy and the other half is theology. Again, they all, no matter where you are on that spectrum, you ask the same questions. They have to do with, is there a God or not? Are you favorably disposed to the idea of God or gods or not? Is there a spiritual realm or not? Or is this all that there is? What do we do about suffering of ourselves and about those around us? Are we supposed to concentrate on those and help others endure the weights that they're having to carry? What do we do about our own weight? Are we supposed to carry it? Nietzsche said that. Carry your suffering. Don't try to get away from it, he says. He was a nihilist. He said he's the one who coined the term, that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. His philosophy was embrace the suffering. Don't try to get rid of it. Let it either kill you or let it make you stronger. And it'll weed out, this process will weed out those who are weak, who don't deserve to live, he says. And you'll either kill yourself and thus do the world a favor, or you will become strong enough to survive and let the weak, don't shun your. So there's lots of different ways to look at this concept of suffering, lots of different paths to take. Again, the Christianity has become a way to get out from underneath the suffering, the weight that you need to be carrying, that you are responsible for, that God has put on your shoulders, that others have put on you, that you have put on yourself. I think what the Bible actually teaches, that sounds arrogant. I'm going to get back to the spectrum. Before I get to what I think the Bible really teaches about suffering and about freedom, let's talk about this spectrum, which I've started to call the Autotheistic Spectrum, which autotheism just means you worship yourself. And this will get at the heart of freedom when I can tie it back together again. No matter what theology, no matter what denomination, no matter what Christian denomination I look into, there's a counterpart on the philosopher side, on the side of philosophy. Someone's walking by. Hold on. Ancient Greek philosophy has had a tremendous impact on the evolution of our understanding of the gospel, and I think it has culminated in the way the gospel is presented today, as Jesus is our Savior, meaning he is the one who has come to carry all our weights for us, fight all our battles for us, rescue us because we can't do anything. I think ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, and even Pythagoras and Epicurus and others, Diogenes, their thoughts and approaches to these basic questions of life have underpinned and infused themselves into our current understanding of what the gospel is. And so we don't see the Bible when it's like we've got the blinders on. I'm sure I'm guilty of it myself. I'm not saying I have all the answers. But wherever you fall on that spectrum of philosophy to theology, they're all asking the same questions. They all have different answers. You will find yourself on that spectrum somewhere or the other. The thing that determines whether you fall on the philosophical side or the theological side is two different factors that I can see. These are the patterns that I see. Are you favorably disposed to the idea of gods in general, or specifically the God of the Bible? Does the God of the Bible, does it rankle you on some level, or do you look favorably upon the idea of God? And the other question is, how important is it to you to be able to understand and explain what you believe? If you just believe stuff and you don't want to explain it, it's just what I believe. I don't need to explain myself to you. It's just what I believe. If that's your attitude, then you side more in the theology and faith department. Faith meaning, that's how we currently define faith. It's just what I believe. Why do you believe it? I don't know. I just do. That's good enough. Okay, fine. But if it's important to you to be able to understand and explain to you why, this is why I believe the way I do. This is why I agree with Plato or Aristotle on their basic idea of metaphysics and the way the world works. Or this, and this is why. Whoa. That's kind of cool. Interesting. It's had a little hiccup there. How's that? That's fine. If it's important to you to be able to understand and explain why you believe what you believe, and if God is, you like the idea of God, the God of the Bible, then you'll sway more toward theology. But there's a counterpart for no matter what position you take. There's a denomination to fit you, and it's all a hybrid of our current understanding of what the gospel is, interfused with the things we were raised to believe, and different philosophers that you can trace your lineage back to. It's very fascinating. And it's not just in Christianity that these facets are in. Any religion that I've found is broken up into groups that think one way about the idea of the gods. They're intimate and close and interested in what you're doing day to day, or they're distant and they don't really care and they leave it up to us. It's like all these different facets. The mix is really interesting. I call it the Autotheistic Spectrum because at the heart of every single place on that whole spectrum is underneath it all. All right, this is kind of frustrating. Maybe I'm not supposed to talk about this, eh? Underneath it all, no matter where you fall on the spectrum, we all want to do what we want to do. We don't want someone else telling us what to do. Which brings us back to our topic of freedom. Because the opposite of freedom is slavery. And Paul the Apostle, everyone's favorite, is very big on this concept that we all serve somebody. We all serve ourselves. We want to serve ourselves. We don't want someone else to tell us what to do, including God. We like to explain away why it's okay for us to sin, to rebel, and to serve ourselves. We like to make ourselves God. I'm guilty of it myself. I may be doing it right now. I may be insisting on finishing this video when God maybe wants my attention so that he could have me do something else right now, but I'm not. I very well could be serving myself in doing this video, which is a little unnerving, but I think I'm saying we, and that means you and me. I think we like the idea of God coming to rescue and save us and deliver us and set us free from the responsibilities of our actions and from our suffering. I think about everyone getting all worked up about the way the world is now, and all the crazy uproar for 2020 and all that. I think everyone just wants life to go back to normal. We want everything to be peaceful and everyone to be happy and prosperous so that we can just live our lives and do what we want to do. We want the world to be in a peaceful, serene way. Everyone's getting along so that we can all just live our lives. I don't think that the appeal of serving, of being a slave, I don't think that appeals to anybody. And why would it? It goes counter to our human nature. And yet Paul says that he became... Here, let me read this to you. I'll edit this. Listen to this verse. 1 Corinthians 9:19, for though I am free from all men, I have made myself a servant to all men, that I might win the more. Freedom. We want to be free. We don't want to volunteer for slavery. The only way to get off this autotheistic spectrum, there's one off-ramp, that's it. And it's a door and it's shaped like a cross. The only way to be free from this desire to be our own God, to live our life the way we want to live it. The only way to be free from that is to become a servant of somebody else. And when I mean a servant, I mean a slave. And I mean by that, every moment you're doing something that someone else wants you to do. And by someone else, I mean God. God has given us an out. Jesus came to create a door that we can go through, but that door is a death. And the way that we get free from serving ourselves, free, I'm talking about freedom. I'm getting to the punchline now about what the Bible says freedom is and how the Bible actually deals with suffering. The suffering is to draw us to God. And that is not so that we can whine until He takes the suffering away. It's to get our attention so that we can stop doing what we want to do at any given moment and say instead, Father, what would you have me do right now? I know I've touched on this on a couple other videos, but it's all coming together now with this in my study into church history and the evolution of the gospel, and when I'm seeing how deep the ancient Greek philosophers have affected the way the gospel is preached today. And not just that, the idea of freedom as an American, with we were born in rebellion, we all want to be free to pursue happiness and all of that. Freedom is a big deal for Americans. Our freedoms, we got to fight for our freedoms. No, what we want is life to be great so that we can do whatever we want without reference to God. We want God on the periphery and we want Him to bless us in our life, but we certainly don't want to serve Him. We all want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant, when all is said and done. But how many of us actually serve Him? You know what the alternative is? Depart from me, wicked and lazy servant. The issue is service. What do you think about the idea of serving God? We make it a synonym for being a Christian. Oh, he's a real servant of God. Is he? Am I? Are you? Do we serve Him? How do we know? How do we serve? That's the root. That's the way the seed goes into the ground and then dies and becomes, on the other side of that death, what God intended it to be. That's freedom. On the other side of that resurrection is freedom. That's what the Bible talks about. You are free from your compulsion to sin. You're free from your rebellion. You're free from your urge to serve yourself. You're free from making yourself God. That keeps us bound. Paul talks about that in Romans. No one ever talks about that. We're slaves to sin. We're slaves to our first Adam. Our God is our belly, he says. There's only one way out of that, and that's death. Talks about that in Romans 7. Those who are under the law has dominion over people as long as they're alive. Once they're dead, they're free from the law. Free. There's freedom again, huh? These are some big issues, some heady issues that we're talking about. I understand that, but as you can see now why I've been hesitant to make more videos, because how do you talk about something like this concisely? The Autotheistic Spectrum. Well, your belief system, what you believe, you can find your spot on that spectrum. What you believe is dictating every action that you take during the day, every word that you speak. Your belief system is at the foundation of your day-to-day behavior. If that belief system is bound like a slave to sin, you're bound to serving yourself. Jesus came to free you from that, and not free you from the responsibility of it, not so that you can sow something and reap something else. That's to change you so that you can, for the rest of your existence, sow the right things and reap the right things. Sow to the weight that you want to carry. He didn't come to be a savior to free us from the repercussions of our sinful behavior, so that we can keep sinning and He'll pay the price and we get to enjoy heaven. Meaning we get to continue to live the way we want in a perfect and happy and wonderful environment, and someone else will foot the bill for it. That's not how it goes, yet that's what Christianity has become. It's funny, on that spectrum, if you go as far as you can to one side toward philosophy, you run into a belief system called nihilism, which says that whatever happens here on this earth doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We'll all die and disappear into nothingness, and ultimately, who cares? It's very fatalistic. It's like there's no point in life. No, there's no point in this life. This life doesn't matter. Nothing that happens here matters to a nihilist. You go all the way on the other side to theology, as far to the extreme as you can go, and you know what you find there is also nihilism. Only it's Christian nihilism. It's saying that what happens here in this life doesn't matter. What matters is what will happen in heaven when we get there. So you can live however you want here. It does not matter to a surprising number of Christians when you boil it down, including possibly you. Think about it. Your actions that you're taking today, if you believe they're already forgiven, and that what you believe is that nothing that happens in this life really matters. If you're a Calvinist, it's even worse, because you believe everything that's going to happen is already predetermined anyway, so you can't be held responsible for things that are predetermined. And so God is either going to save you or he's not. And that had nothing to do with your behavior. So nothing that happens in this world really ultimately matters. It's nihilism on both extremes. And on both extremes, it's all about us serving ourselves. It's all about being our own God. Meaning we tell us what to do each day. Who is telling you what to do each day? If it's you, then you're your own God. If it's someone else, then they're your God. It's like there's something about human nature that makes us want to exist that way. And there's only one off-ramp, and it's the cross. And it's your cross. And it's the place where you get to, at any given moment, you're interested in what someone else wants you to do, not you. That puts to death the God that's in you. I don't know how else to put it. All right. So I'm going to review this, and if it's worthwhile, I'll put it up. If it's too rambling and all over the place and incoherent, then I'll just try again some other point. I had the time, and I thought I'd at least give it a shot. So I hope that you're doing well. If you've got any responses or any questions, or if that didn't overwhelm you, then we can get some dialogue going. Otherwise, think about it. Think about who you're serving. We could talk more about philosophy and the different variations between Plato and Aristotle, and how you can find one or the other of them in almost any Christian denomination at the teaching level, the way the Bible is presented as opposed to what it actually says. It's really interesting. It's really interesting. All right, I'm going to stop and we'll go from there. And thanks. Bye.